was the last dog in a dying shelter. Silent, starved, and sentenced to disappear in 2 days. The man who walked in wasn't looking for a dog. He was trying to outrun the ghosts of a war that never left him. When their eyes met,
I'm here now.
one
You're
broken
safe.
by battle, one broken by humans. Something ancient and unspoken flickered between them. Not trust, not hope. Just a spark. The kind that only appears when two wounded souls recognize each other in the dark. No one knew this moment would unravel a buried military secret or reveal a truth powerful enough to shake an entire system. And no one imagined that this retired K9, marked unstable, would rise again as the guardian who would change countless lives. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Guardian Stories Ridge for more stories of faith, healing, and second chances. Montana's late winter had a way of settling into a man's bones. The kind of cold that didn't simply sit on the skin, but pressed inward slowly, as if trying to remind you of every mistake you'd ever made. Snow still clung to rooftops in thin gray patches, melting into muddy streaks down the gutters. The dirt roads, salted and resalted, had turned into thick paths of slush that sucked at boots and tires alike. In the middle of all that chilled quiet, the small animal shelter on the outskirts of Willow Ridge felt like a place time had forgotten. The faded red barn-style building sagged at the edges, its once bright paint dulled into a defeated pink. Rowan Maddox stepped out of his old truck and felt the air bite at the scar tissue beneath his left knee. He shifted his weight, the limp barely noticeable unless someone watched him closely. But the pain never quite left. Its dull throb was a familiar companion from Afghanistan, where an explosion had torn into his squad and left him limping out of a valley that swallowed the rest of them whole. For years, that limp had been less of a wound and more of a memorial he carried on his own body. The shelter manager, a wiry man in his 50s with wind-burned cheeks and a mustache that had surrendered to the color gray, waved him over. "Thanks for coming, Rowan. Old truck won't start again. Battery's dying or something. Thought maybe you could get it running long enough for us to move things before we shut down." His voice carried a bitter mixture of exhaustion and resignation. The shelter was closing in 2 days. "Funding cuts," he'd said over the phone. "Too many animals, not enough hands." Rowan nodded silently, tugging the zipper of his gray security jacket a little higher as he followed the man to the back lot. He kept his head low, not because he wanted to avoid people, but because people had a way of reading too much into his eyes. Storm-colored eyes that held more ghosts than he ever admitted. While the manager unlocked the storage shed for parts, Rowan's gaze drifted toward the long stretch of kennels running along the side of the shelter. The chorus of barks, yelps, and restless pacing was familiar. He'd heard it when working security at military bases, and he'd heard it in the aftermath of raids overseas when K9 units were brought in to track explosives. Something nudged him, an old instinct, like a tap between the shoulder blades. He didn't ignore instincts. Few Marines survived long enough to become veterans by ignoring instincts. He walked toward the kennels, his boots sinking slightly into the melting slush, hands tucked into the pockets of his brown cargo pants. Dogs of all kinds lined the row, some barking frantically, some whining, some too tired or too resigned to move from their corner. A pair of kittens mewing from a cage at the far end managed to stir a faint ache in his chest. But then his steps stalled. Something. Still. In the last kennel, almost, hidden in the shadowed corner, lay a German shepherd. Not just thin, emaciated, ribs visible even through the thick sable fur that had once been sleek. The coat was patchy, dull, the kind of dull that comes not from dirt, but from stress, fear, and months of unease. His ears weren't upright like a shepherd's should be. One drooped halfway, the other flattened back as if waiting for a blow. He didn't bark, didn't whine, didn't move. He simply pressed himself against the cold metal wall, as if trying to vanish inside it. Rowan's breath froze in his chest. He knew that posture. He knew that rigid stillness, the trembling just under the skin, the eyes that wouldn't focus on any one thing because they were terrified of seeing too much. He'd seen those eyes in the mirror the first year after coming home. The peeling tag on the kennel door read, "Canine retired, aggressive, not for adoption. Scheduled for euthanasia, Saturday." Just one line, stamped in bureaucratic ink. A verdict. He tried swallowing the sudden tightness in his throat, but it didn't go down. He stepped closer, careful not to stand too straight or loom too near. The dog didn't lift his head. Not exactly. But one amber eye, ringed with the kind of old pain Rowan didn't need explained, flicked open and caught sight of the gray security jacket, the tactical gloves tucked into Rowan's pocket, the boots worn from years of field work. A low sound crawled out of the dog's throat, not a growl aimed at threat, but a warning birthed out of memory. Rowan didn't reach out. He didn't crouch. He didn't speak. He simply existed there for a moment, letting the dog see him, smell him, measure him. And slowly, the shepherd raised his head an inch higher, nostrils flaring as if catching a familiar scent buried beneath years of fear. The shelter manager arrived behind Rowan with a clipboard in hand. Ah, that one. Ridge, or at least that's the name written on the file they sent us. Says he used to be a military canine, but all the details are wiped clean. Redacted. He's attacked trainers. Wouldn't eat for days. Doc said he's too far gone. Dangerous. No one gets near him. He lowered his voice, as if telling a secret no one else wanted. Honestly, we've been told to put him down this weekend. Can't transfer him. Liability too high. A young shelter worker stepped over, hugging her arms around herself against the cold. She had freckles across her cheeks and soft brown hair tied in a messy knot. "He's not mean," she murmured. "Just gone. Like he's living inside some place we can't reach." Rowan understood that place too well. He took one step back, giving the dog space. Ridge's ears pinned tight, but he didn't retreat further into the corner. His gaze locked onto Rowan's, steady, unblinking, waiting. The manager sighed. "Look, if you want to try something, I'll sign the liability waiver right now. We're desperate. Last 2 days before this place shuts down." Rowan's jaw clenched. He didn't look at the manager. He didn't look at the clipboard. He kept his eyes on Ridge, on the trembling muscles beneath the shepherd's patchy coat, on the broken creature that shouldn't have been broken in the first place. A sudden gust of wind rattled the metal siding of the shelter, sending a hollow clanging through the kennels. Every dog barked, every cage rattled, except Ridge. Ridge didn't flinch. Instead, his eyes widened, and for a fraction of a second, Rowan saw something flicker inside them. Not recognition, not fear, but a strange, sharp alertness, as if the wind carried something only Ridge could sense, something coming, something Rowan couldn't yet see. The shepherd's gaze snapped back to Rowan with an intensity that felt almost like a plea or a warning, or both. The hair on the back of Rowan's neck rose. Marines trust gut feelings, and his gut whispered, "This dog knows something, something no one else here understands." The manager cleared his throat, breaking the moment. "So, you want him, Maddox?" Rowan inhaled slowly. He saw flashes in his mind, the nights waking drenched in sweat, The valley in Afghanistan glowing with muzzle flashes, the deafening ring in his ears after the explosion. The feeling of walking away when others didn't. He saw himself curled on a barracks cot, staring into the dark the same way Ridge now stared at him. No one deserves to be left behind twice, Rowan said quietly. He signed the papers before the manager even finished reaching for a pen. The clipboard felt heavier than it should have, as if he had just accepted responsibility for more than a dog. The young shelter worker opened the kennel with cautious movements. As the gate creaked, Ridge jerked back so violently that his claws scraped sparks off the concrete floor. His breaths came in short, panicked bursts. When the door opened fully, he didn't rush out. He shrank back into the darkness, eyes wide, as if stepping outside meant stepping back into whatever place had broken him. Rowan crouched near the doorway, still not reaching in, still not touching. His voice was steady, low, a tone he'd once used to guide terrified civilians out of collapsed buildings overseas. No one's going to hurt you. Not today. For a heartbeat, Ridge didn't move. Then, so slightly Rowan almost missed it. The shepherd shifted his weight forward. Not a step, just a lean, a possibility. But the moment snapped. A loud bang echoed from the back of the shelter, someone dropping a metal crate. Ridge's entire body tensed, every muscle coiling into terror. His eyes flared wild, and he launched backward into the corner so hard the kennel shook. Rowan felt something pull in his chest. This was no aggressive dog. This was a soldier who'd been pushed beyond any breaking point. He stood, took the leash offered by the worker, and spoke firmly. "I'm not trying. I'm taking him." No one in the room argued. Maybe they were too shocked. Maybe they sensed something unspoken between the man and the dog. Two broken survivors recognizing the pieces inside each other. The leash felt rough in Rowan's hand as he stepped closer again. Ridge didn't come out. Not yet. Not easily. But Rowan didn't step away. He stood there, steady as a mountain, letting Ridge see him, breathe him in, feel the quiet stability in his posture. He waited, not with impatience, not with fear, but with the sort of patience born out of war and recovery and long nights spent learning how to breathe again. The chapter closed the way all uncertain beginnings do. With a door open, a leash held loose, and a dog trembling in the shadows. Ridge did not step forward. Instead, he backed deeper into darkness, his amber eyes reflecting the light like two small flames trapped behind glass. Rowan exhaled softly. Getting Ridge out of that cage would be harder than any battle he had fought. But something in his soul whispered that this was the path he was meant to walk. And somewhere beyond fear, beyond memory, beyond the broken places, Ridge seemed to hear the same call. Rowan tightened his grip on the leash, not to pull, but to be ready when Ridge finally decided to try. And he whispered a silent prayer over both their lives. If you feel the presence of miracles, of second chances, and of God's quiet work in broken places, please like, comment, and subscribe to Guardian Stories Ridge so more hearts can be reached through stories of redemption. The road to Rowan Maddox's ranch snaked through the last stretch of pine woods before opening into a clearing dotted with weather-beaten fences and frost-stiff grass. The place looked as though winter had decided to settle in permanently, clinging to every surface in shades of white and gray. His grandfather's old property had once been a lively ranch, horses, goats, a vegetable garden, laughter in the summers. But now it stood quiet and half-forgotten, its wooden beams sagging under time and memory. The old barn leaned slightly to the left, and the empty stalls smelled faintly of hay that hadn't been fresh in years. Rowan parked his hand-me-down truck near the fence and stepped out, his boots crunching over a mix of ice and gravel. Ridge sat stiffly in the back seat, muscles locked, amber eyes staring out into the wide-open world, as if the space itself was a threat. Rowan kept his movements slow, not reaching in, not grabbing, just opening the door and letting the cold wind do the rest. Ridge hesitated, nose twitching. Then he leapt out in a burst of fear, landing with a skid, stance lowered, tail rigid. His breath came fast, shallow, as if he expected an explosion at any moment. "Easy," Rowan murmured, though he knew the word meant nothing to a dog who had learned to fear commands. Ridge refused to go near the barn. Every clang of metal made him recoil, each glint of wire or tool caused him to flinch violently. When Rowan lifted a rusted latch on the old horse stall, Ridge let out a guttural sound, half snarl, half plea, before backing toward the tree line, torn between staying and fleeing. Rowan didn't push. He simply left the stall door open, set down a metal bowl of water, another of food softened slightly with warm broth, and placed the worn blanket he'd brought from the truck inside the stall. Then he walked away, giving Ridge the distance he so desperately needed. He climbed onto the porch steps of the ranch house, shrugging out of his security jacket and wrapping it loosely around his shoulders. The porch lamp flickered with a tired amber glow, illuminating his pensive eyes. Ridge lingered 10 yards away, pacing in a slow arc around the porch, as though unsure whether the house or the darkness was the greater danger. Rowan spoke into the cold without looking directly at Ridge. "I wasn't good at sleeping either. Woke up most nights swinging at shadows." His voice carried the weight of someone who didn't usually share. "Lost my squad in a valley back home. After that, I couldn't stay in crowds, couldn't stand people telling me I was fine." Ridge paused his pacing, ears flicking forward. "VA put me on meds," Rowan continued softly. "Didn't like how they made everything foggy. I'd rather feel the pain than feel nothing at all." He took a slow breath. "That's why I came back here. My grandfather always said war couldn't follow you where the pines are tall enough to touch heaven." Ridge's breathing steadied, not calm, not trusting, but no longer frantic. He remained in the safe distance, that invisible space where he could see Rowan clearly, but still bolt if needed. Each gust of wind that rustled through the pine needles made him tense, yet his ears kept turning toward Rowan, as if the man's voice anchored him to something real. The night deepened around them. A distant rumble of thunder rolled over the mountains, the first hint of spring storms. Ridge stiffened immediately, hackles rising. Rowan didn't move closer. He only shifted slightly to the side on the porch, making space on the step as if silently inviting Ridge to take it, without expectation. They stayed that way for hours. Rowan sat against the porch post, warmth from the lamp casting soft shadows across his sun-tanned skin and tired eyes. Ridge lay down eventually, not near him, but not far either. Curled loosely with his head raised, watching everything. Two battle-worn souls sharing a silence that needed no translation. When the wind shifted, Ridge suddenly lifted his head sharply, eyes narrowing at a point far beyond the tree line. The fur along his spine lifted in a slow ripple. For a moment, he wasn't the terrified dog from the shelter. He was a soldier again, alert, listening to something Rowan couldn't hear. His gaze locked onto a patch of darkness between the pines, unwavering. Rowan felt a cold shiver crawl up his arm. It wasn't fear. It was that instinct Marines trusted with their lives, the one that whispered, "Something is out there." Something Ridge remembers. Then Ridge let out a single, low, trembling whine, a sound of warning or recognition. Rowan's pulse quickened. He didn't know what the dog sensed, but he knew one thing with certainty. Whatever haunted Ridge hadn't been left behind at the shelter. As dawn approached, the sky softened to lavender and blue, paling the stars. Rowan finally stood, stretching the stiffness from his injured leg. Ridge's ears twitched at the movement, but he didn't flee. That alone was progress. A truck rumbled up the dirt path toward the ranch. The vehicle was dusty white with faded blue lettering. Cole Veterinary Service. Dr. Hannah Cole stepped out, tugging her brown coat tight against the cold. She was a woman in her early 40s, lean but not fragile, with warm brown eyes and sharp cheekbones that made her look both tough and kind at once. Her dark hair was tied back in a low ponytail, revealing faint stress lines around her eyes, marks of someone who had tended to too many animals and carried too many stories. She gave Rowan a small smile. "Heard you took in the shepherd no one else wanted. Figured I'd come check on him." Before Rowan could warn her, she set down her heavy navy blue veterinary bag. The metal instruments inside clinked loudly. The reaction was instantaneous. Ridge exploded backward, slamming into the old fence with a desperate whimper. His entire body trembled, pupils blown wide. His lips curled, not in aggression, but in terror, the kind of terror etched into muscle memory by repeated trauma. He pressed himself so hard against the fence, Rowan feared he might break through it. Hannah froze, hands raised. "Whoa, that's not normal defensive aggression." Her voice shifted, no longer casual but clinical and deeply concerned. "That's trauma response, severe." Rowan stood between them instinctively. "He panics at metal sounds, tools, wires, anything like that." Hannah nodded slowly, eyes tracking Ridge's trembling frame. "Someone did more than train him," she murmured. "Someone conditioned him over and over again. You don't get this level of fear without repeated medical stress, shock collars, restraints, forced procedures." Rowan clenched his jaw. He'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed, especially by someone who had seen more wounded animals than anyone in town, hit him harder than expected. Hannah spoke gently. "I can't treat trauma like this with medication alone. If I sedate him, he'll wake up more confused and afraid. He needs stability, presence, a person who knows what he used to be, before he was turned into this." Rowan watched Ridge, who had lowered into a crouch so tight his ribcage barely moved with each breath. Something inside Rowan tightened. Not pity, not sympathy, but recognition. This wasn't just a dog with fear issues. This was a soldier carrying scars no one bothered to look at. Clouds gathered over the ranch, thickening into a dark curtain across the sky. Thunder rumbled again, closer this time. The air shifted with the metallic scent of an oncoming storm. Ridge jerked upright, eyes wild, and without warning bolted toward the broken section of fence. "Ridge!" Rowan lunged forward, snagging only the worn leash he'd carried from the shelter. But Ridge cleared the gap, sprinting into the pine woods, swallowed almost immediately by the growing storm. Rowan's heart lurched, not for the dog alone, but because something deeper, instinctual, spiritual even, shook inside him. It felt as though losing Ridge now would rip out a part of himself he hadn't known was still alive. He stood in the cold wind, clutching the empty leash, staring into the dark woods where Ridge had vanished. And he whispered a prayer as thunder cracked open the sky. If these stories touch your heart and remind you of God's quiet miracles, please like, comment, and subscribe to Guardian Stories Ridge. Your support helps these stories reach others who need hope. The storm broke over the mountains with the kind of force that made the pines sway, like thin prayer towers in the wind. Rowan Maddox didn't feel the cold when he sprinted into the woods. only the crushing urgency pounding in rhythm with the thunder overhead. The rain poured down in sheets, blurring the trees into shadows, turning the ground into a slick, unforgiving mire. His left leg throbbed sharply with every step, the old injury protesting against the uneven terrain. But he pushed through the pain, the way Marines do, by not giving it a voice. Ridge's tracks were fresh, frantic, erratic. Prints that dug deep into the mud, veering sharply around trees, splashing through puddles, sometimes smeared where the dog had stumbled. Rowan crouched beside one imprint and saw something that quickened his pulse, a smear of red diluted in rainwater. Ridge had scraped himself when breaking through the fence. "Damn it, boy. Why'd you run?" Rowan muttered, wiping the rain from his eyes as lightning split the sky with a jagged white roar. The storm made the world feel endless, but the signs Ridge left pulled Rowan forward like an invisible thread. Bent branches, claw marks on softened bark, discolored mud where paws had slipped. The deeper he went, the denser the woods became, the sound of the storm ricocheting through the canopy like rolling artillery. Rowan's breath hitched when he finally spotted the narrow drainage culvert. Old, half-collapsed, lined with moss and broken boards. He had passed it many times as a kid, never imagining he'd one day crawl through it searching for a terrified war dog. A low, broken whine drifted out from the darkness. "Ridge," Rowan whispered, dropping to his knees, peering into the culvert. The dog was wedged between a fallen timber beam and the cold stone wall. Mud splattered across his sable coat. His chest rose in rapid, shallow pulls. His eyes, wide, wild, empty, didn't seem to recognize the world, much less the man kneeling in front of him. Rainwater collected around Ridge's paws, rippling with each shudder of fear that ran through him. Most people would have tried to drag him out. Others might shout or clap to get his attention. Rowan did neither. He sat down directly into the mud, letting the storm drench him completely, and placed his hands where Ridge could see them. "Listen," he said quietly, voice barely audible over the thunder. "I know that panic. I know when the world drops out from under you and all you hear is the noise from the last time everything went wrong." Ridge's trembling slowed. Not much, but enough for Rowan to continue. "You're not in that place anymore," Rowan said, leaning back slightly so Ridge didn't feel cornered. "I left a part of myself in a valley overseas, a part I never got back." His voice dropped, softer still. "There was a K-9 that night, from another unit. Big shepherd, strong, loyal." He pulled his handler back just seconds before. "The mortars fell, saved half the squad. Mine wasn't that lucky." Lightning illuminated the culvert, washing Ridge in a harsh white glow. The dog's ears twitched forward, then relaxed. Rain ran in small rivers down his muzzle. But for the first time since fleeing the ranch, he blinked slowly instead of in wild panic. Rowan exhaled. That dog. He made sure his man lived. You might have known him. Or maybe you were like him. You all carry the same kind of courage, don't you? The culvert fell quiet, except for the storm. Then, with a hesitant motion, Ridge shifted his weight, inching away from the beam's pressure. He didn't approach Rowan, not yet, but he crawled toward the opening on his own, pausing just beyond arm's reach. His gaze wasn't trusting, but it wasn't lost anymore. The two walked back toward the ranch with slow, careful steps. Ridge slightly ahead, Rowan trailing behind so the dog wouldn't feel chased. Ridge kept enough distance to bolt if needed, but not enough to break the invisible bond that had formed in the storm. The sky began to lighten as the storm faded. The morning broke quietly over the pines, washing the ranch in silver blue light. Rowan's clothes were ruined, soaked in mud and pine debris, but he didn't care. Ridge, exhausted, sank to the ground several feet from the porch. They were warriors who understood each other without needing to touch. A few days later, Rowan heard Hannah's truck long before it pulled up the gravel drive. Dr. Hannah Cole stepped out, wearing her navy blue coat buttoned high against the wind. Her expression carried both determination and something deeper, a quiet grief reserved for creatures who have suffered too long. She handed Rowan a thin manila envelope, edges worn as if she'd handled it too often. "It's everything I could pull from the old networks," she said. "Not much, but more than nothing." Inside were only a handful of records, each stamped with heavy redactions. Former name, K9 Harbor, EOD Detection Unit. Status, transferred to Advanced Behavioral Conditioning Program Officer in Charge. Major Trent Harlow. Final assessment, unstable. Unsuitable for further deployment. Recommend removal. Rowan's grip tightened unconsciously. Harlow. The name hit him like a cold blade. Harlow was a whispered ghost in military circles, an officer rumored to push dogs beyond their limits under the guise of enhanced performance. Hannah pointed to the last page. "Look at the coordinates listed in his final deployment." Rowan's breath caught. He knew that place. It was the valley where his squad had been ambushed. He knelt beside Ridge, who lay near the porch steps, half dozing, ears still twitching at small sounds. Rowan gently placed the file beside him. Ridge lifted his head, sniffed it, then looked up at Rowan with an expression that was almost haunted. Rowan whispered, "You were there, weren't you? In that valley, you saw something. Or someone tried to silence you afterward." Ridge stiffened suddenly, nose lifting toward the distant road as though catching a scent only he could identify. His ears went sharply forward, posture straightening from tired to alert in a heartbeat. Then, without warning, he released a deep, low growl, staring at the path leading into town. His gaze was locked, unwavering. Rowan hadn't heard anything yet, but some instinct within him recoiled at the look in Ridge's eyes. It wasn't fear. It was recognition, as though Ridge sensed someone, or something, he'd seen before. Someone dangerous, someone approaching. Moments later, Rowan finally heard it, the faint rumble of an unfamiliar engine making its way up the gravel road. A chill raced down his spine. Ridge remained in his position, not running this time, not panicking, only watching, guarding, waiting. Whatever haunted Ridge had found their trail again. As the wind picked up, Rowan placed a steady hand over his heart and whispered, "Lord, guide us through whatever comes next." If this story has touched your spirit, reminding you that God works even in life's storms, please like, comment, and subscribe to Guardian Stories Ridge. Your support helps these stories reach those who need hope the most. Rowan Maddox had learned to read the silence of the ranch. It had its own rhythm. Wind through the fence slats, crows landing on the old barn roof, the distant hum of logging trucks on the mountain road. But this morning, something broke that pattern. Ridge stiffened before Rowan had even pulled on his boots, lifting his head sharply from where he lay near the porch steps. The shepherd rose in one swift movement, body going taut like a drawn bow. His sable coat rippled as a chill breeze brushed through the yard. Ridge's ears pricked forward. Then he turned to Rowan and emitted a low, urging whine, one that vibrated with a tension the Marine had heard only on nights when something unseen stalked the perimeter. "What is it, buddy?" Rowan asked, but he already knew this wasn't a coincidence. Ridge didn't behave like this without reason. The dog trotted toward the dirt road, then stopped and looked back at Rowan, eyes sharp and urgent. He wasn't running away. He was asking Rowan to follow. Rowan grabbed the old leash, not to restrain, but to show Ridge he was coming, and followed the shepherd to the truck. Ridge jumped into the back seat in a single fluid motion. He sat upright, staring out the windshield like a second navigator. "Lead the way," Rowan muttered, starting the engine. He followed Ridge's cues. When Rowan turned too far west, Ridge whined, pawing the back seat. When he went too far north, Ridge raked his nails lightly over the upholstery. Gradually, they wound down a narrow path toward the river plains, a place Rowan hadn't visited since childhood. The closer they got, the more restless Ridge became. His breath quickened, but not with fear. This was vigilance, the sharp focus of a dog who knew danger intimately. When the truck rolled to a stop near the old timber bridge by the river, Ridge sprang out before the engine fully died. He raced down the embankment, nose glued to the ground, paws kicking up wet grass. He paused, head snapping left, then barked, one sharp, commanding sound. Rowan's heartbeat surged as he ran after him. Under the wooden bridge, huddled against one of the support beams, sat a girl, no more than 10. Her small frame shook violently, clothes soaked from the river spray. Wet blonde hair clung to her cheeks. Her knees were drawn tight to her chest, as if she were folding herself into invisibility. Ridge didn't rush her. He slowed, lowering his head, tail neutral. Body language softened into something Rowan had never seen from him before. Gentle, protective calm. Ridge positioned himself between the girl and the riverbank, as if ensuring she didn't slip or get swept away. Rowan approached carefully. "Hey, sweetheart, you okay?" The girl flinched, eyes wide and red from crying. She looked like she'd been running for hours. "My name's Rowan," he said softly. "This here is Ridge. He won't hurt you." The girl's small voice cracked. He didn't scare me." "What's your name?" "Maddie," she whispered, wiping her nose with a trembling hand. Maddie's face was delicate, pale from fear, freckles sprinkled lightly across her cheeks. She wore jeans 2 sizes too big and a hoodie printed with a faded cartoon fox. Mud streaked her arms and her shoes were missing. The river must have taken them. Rowan crouched down, the old ache in his leg flaring. "Did you get lost?" She shook her head fiercely. "No, I ran. I had to." Rowan exchanged a glance with Ridge. The dog didn't move, didn't react, except for the way his eyes softened toward the girl, as if he sensed the knot of fear tangled inside her. Maddie took a shaky breath. "My dad. He works at the mining company in the mountains. He's been scared lately. Really scared." "Scared of what?" She hesitated, tears returning. "Men from his work. They kept calling, yelling, saying if he talked to anyone about what he saw, they'd make sure no one ever finds what they did to the dog in their testing site." Her voice lowered to a whisper. "They said accidents happen on the river." Ridge released a deep, tight sound, not a growl of threat, but a painful, guttural whine. His ears shot upright, eyes widening as though a locked memory had just been torn open inside him. And then, slowly, miraculously, Ridge stepped closer until Maddie's hand rested tentatively on his neck. For the first time since Rowan had known him, Ridge allowed a child to touch him, leaning slightly into her small palm. Rowan felt something shift in the air, like the moment before lightning touches the ground. Maddie suddenly pointed to Ridge's chest patch, an off-center bright marking shaped like a broken arrow. I've seen that before," she whispered, "on a paper in my dad's office, next to a red stamp that said, 'Restricted.'" She shivered, eyes drifting to the tree line as if expecting someone to appear. Dad said a dog with that mark wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Ridge froze, eyes going glassy and distant. Then he jerked his head toward the mountains, posture rigid, as if remembering a scent or a scream buried deep in the marrow of his bones. Rowan felt his skin prickle. Maddie wasn't the only one who knew too much, and someone out there might already know she talked. Gently, Rowan scooped Maddie up, wrapping his jacket around her. Ridge stayed close, guarding each step as they returned to the truck. Back at the ranch, Rowan called the sheriff. Sheriff Lucas Hale arrived within 20 minutes. He was a tall man in his early 50s, with silver crew-cut hair and a weathered face carved from years of service. His navy jacket bore the marks of a working sheriff. Mud stains, frayed threads, a badge as worn as the man who carried it. His eyes were sharp. Soldier's eyes that had once belonged to the National Guard before life brought him home to serve differently. Lucas listened while Maddie talked, nodding slowly, his jaw tightening. "Company's been under investigation before," he said, voice low. "Accidents, missing records, workers silenced. Thought it was corporate nonsense. Now I'm not so sure." He crouched beside Ridge, studying the dog with the careful gaze of someone who once trusted dogs with his life. Whatever he's remembering, it's tied to all of this. They sat on the porch discussing next steps when the television inside Rowan's living room caught Ridge's attention. A local news broadcast had begun a segment on a private K-9 training facility preparing for a large demonstration for foreign clients. The name flashed across the screen. Major Trent Harlow. Ridge launched to his feet, back arched, muscles bristling, a deep, dangerous growl building in his chest. His eyes locked onto Harlow's image with a hatred Rowan had never seen in any creature, not even in combat. Harlow wasn't just part of Ridge's past. He was the shadow Ridge feared, the ghost Maddie's father whispered about, the predator who turned loyal dogs into disposable tools. Rowan met Ridge's trembling gaze. "We're running out of time," he whispered. "If this story reminds you that God guides us, sometimes through storms, sometimes through instincts, please like, comment, and subscribe to Guardian Stories Ridge. Your support helps these stories bring hope to more hearts." Sheriff Lucas Hale spent the rest of the afternoon pacing Rowan's porch as if patrolling a perimeter. The man had the posture of someone who had spent decades standing between danger and the innocent. Shoulders squared, boots planted firmly in the earth, jaw flexed in silent calculation. His silver crew cut glinted in the sun whenever he turned, storm blue eyes scanning the hills in the distance, as though expecting a threat to materialize from the tree line. When Rowan handed him the thin envelope of Ridge's fragmented military file, Lucas read each redacted line with growing tension. He tapped a finger against the name stamped at the bottom. Major Trent Harlow. "I've heard that name," he muttered. "He was investigated years ago for what folks called questionable conditioning. They couldn't prove anything. The complaints vanished. Witnesses disappeared. And the military swept up the whole mess quicker than snow melting on a hot coil." Rowan felt his stomach tighten. "You think he was experimenting?" "I think," Lucas replied, lowering his voice, "that Harlow liked to play God. Men like that don't stop when you discharge them. They just build empires in the shadows." The next day brought an unexpected development. Dr. Hannah Cole drove up the long gravel road, stepping out of her SUV with a thoughtful expression and a tablet in hand. Hannah always looked like she could stare down chaos itself. Tall, lean, hair tied in a neat bun, eyes sharp behind rectangular glasses. Her hands were steady, surgeon steady, and her calm voice could gentle even the wildest creature. "I got an email," she said, handing Rowan the tablet. It was an invitation, formal, polished, requesting her presence as a veterinary specialist for a canine demonstration event hosted by none other than Harlow Tactical Training Solutions. Foreign clients would be attending, high-profile investors, journalists, and Harlow needed independent experts for optics. Rowan's jaw clenched hard enough to make the muscle twitch. "You think this is a show? A way to sell whatever he's doing?" "Absolutely," Hannah replied. "And people like him love to hide cruelty behind applause." She hesitated before adding, "I want you to come with me. And Ridge." Rowan blinked. "Bring him into the lion's den?" "No," Hannah corrected gently. "Bring him home. Whatever happened to him, he deserves answers just as much as you do." Ridge lifted his head from where he lay under the porch, ears turning at the sound of his name. His golden brown eyes flickered between Rowan and Hannah, quietly observing the tension in their voices. The shepherd looked like a warrior carved from storm and sorrow. 4 years old but aged by trauma, muscles lean beneath his sable coat, his chest marking shaped like a broken arrow catching the afternoon light. Even resting, he held himself like a sentry guarding unseen ghosts. Later that evening, while sorting through old boxes of gear in the storage shed, Rowan stumbled across a water-stained folder he didn't remember packing when he moved back from his last duty station. Paper curled from years of humidity. Ink faded. But one page stood out, a deployment order with a date that made his heart lurch. It matched the final recorded day Harbor, Ridge's former identity, appeared in the military system. The same day Rowan's unit walked into that valley. The same night the world fell apart. His pulse hammered. Ridge hadn't just been somewhere near that disaster. He'd been there. And someone had torn his records apart to erase that connection. The truth wasn't just buried, it had been dragged underground and locked away. During the nights that followed, Rowan trained Ridge on the ranch. But the word training didn't fit what they were doing. Rowan didn't give sharp commands. He spoke like a partner addressing another partner, relying on the old Marine cadence that soothed even the hardest days. "Walk perimeter with me. Check the fence line. Watch the ridge for movement." Ridge responded with quiet precision, not out of fear, but with the solemn purpose of someone reclaiming an identity. He didn't bark. Instead, he used gestures, pausing, glancing, ruffling his fur, growling low, to signal information like seasoned K9 units do. Lucas returned with more documents over the next few days. They were scraps pieced from public records, whistleblower forums, and a mining union that had long resented Harlow's influence. Slowly, a pattern formed, a cruel, horrifying structure beneath the surface. Dogs from Harlow's program were deployed to remote mining sites known for dangerous, unstable terrain. When a dog refused to enter hazardous zones, detecting gas leaks, equipment faults, or underground instability, they were labeled insubordinate. And instead of listening to the warnings, companies blamed the dogs. Some were reassigned, others were disposed of. A few simply vanished. Ridge's silent panic around metal tools, his terror at the sound of chains, his instinct to flee at the first crack of thunder. None of it was random. None of it was behavioral. It was memory. One late evening, while Rowan sat on the porch sanding an old rifle stock, Ridge padded over and lay down beside him, closer than he had ever chosen to lie before. Not touching, but near enough that Rowan felt the warmth radiating from him. "You don't have to go," Rowan whispered. "I won't make you face anything you're not ready for." Ridge turned his head, eyes shining with something Rowan could only describe as solemn determination. The dog placed one paw on Rowan's boot, the gesture quiet but unmistakably deliberate. He was ready. As Rowan stood to stretch his leg, the porch light flickered just once, but unnaturally, as though something had brushed the power line. Ridge shot upright instantly, head whipping toward the tree line. The shepherd's pupils dilated, his chest rumbled with a deep, warning growl. Rowan scanned the darkness, but saw nothing. Until Ridge started backing up slowly, guarding Rowan with his body. Then Rowan smelled it, metallic, faint, unmistakable, accelerant. Someone had been standing near the barn recently, someone who didn't belong. A shadow moved between the trees, gone before Rowan could blink. Ridge didn't chase. He simply stared, trembling as if recognizing a scent he hoped never to encounter again. Rowan felt the hair on his arms rise. The hunt had already begun, and they weren't the ones leading it. The day of the trip came sooner than expected. Rowan helped load Hannah's equipment into her SUV, while Lucas stood by the gate, giving last-minute cautions. "Keep your head on a swivel," Lucas said. "Men like Harlow, when cornered, they lash out." "We're not cornering him yet," Rowan replied. Lucas held Rowan's gaze. "He won't see it that way." Ridge jumped into the back of Rowan's truck, settling on an old blanket. His amber eyes were wide awake, following every flicker of passing headlights reflected across the cab's ceiling. His breathing was steady, controlled, but Rowan sensed the tension coiled deep inside him. They pulled onto the highway, tires humming over asphalt. The mountains loomed ahead like silent judges. Rowan glanced at Ridge through the mirror. "You okay back there?" Ridge didn't blink. He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't resting. He was watching the lights flash like ghosts across the roof. Ghosts from a place he had once barely escaped. This time, he was going back. But he wasn't going alone. If you believe God guides us back to confront what once broke us, so healing can begin, please like, comment, and subscribe to Guardian Stories Ridge. Your support helps these stories reach hearts that need hope. The training complex loomed like a fortress rising out of the scrubland. Tall concrete walls topped with razor wire, steel gates thick enough to stop a truck, cameras perched like mechanical vultures scanning every inch of the entrance road. It stood in harsh contrast to Rowan's wooden ranch, which breathed with the earth and the pines. This place felt engineered, sharpened, polished into something cold and unforgiving. A place built not for animals to learn, but for them to obey. Rowan parked beside Hannah's SUV. Ridge sat alert in the back seat, ears pinned forward, eyes trained on the compound. His breath came in short, deliberate rhythm, as if steadying himself for whatever ghosts waited beyond the gates. He seemed taller when he stepped out. Chest lifted, muscles tense beneath his sable black and gray coat. The broken arrow marking on his chest glowed faintly under the afternoon sun, like some ancient insignia rediscovered after years of burial. Hannah walked beside Rowan, adjusting her coat and pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. Her face was composed, but beneath her calm lay a fire Rowan had learned to trust. "There will be press here," she murmured, "and possibly undercover agents. Keep your guard up." "You expect trouble?" Rowan asked. "When men like Harlow gather an audience," she replied, "they don't do it for transparency. They do it for spectacle." Inside, the main demonstration area resembled an arena. Tiers of metal benches, bright lights, large speaker systems mounted to steel beams. Harlow himself stood on a raised platform, greeting guests with the confidence of someone who believed every eye should be on him. He was a tall man in his 50s, with a square jaw, immaculate uniform-like attire despite being retired, and hair perfectly sculpted as if carved from granite. His smile stretched wide, but it never reached his eyes. Those were cold, calculating, always measuring. "Welcome," Harlow announced, gripping the microphone. "Today, you'll witness the highest level of obedience training ever achieved in the private sector." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Chained handlers brought out dogs, German shepherds, Belgian Malinois, even a few Rottweilers. They moved with precise uniformity, performing high jumps through rings, sliding under barbed obstacles, even charging through bursts of flame without hesitation. At least, not visibly. Rowan could see tremors in their legs, subtle flinches when the speakers crackled. Those weren't tricks. They were survival responses. But Ridge wasn't even looking at the show. His nose lifted instead, nostrils flaring. His posture shifted, low, cautious, as though catching the scent of an old battlefield. Rowan followed his gaze toward the back of the compound, a row of metal kennels partially concealed behind the building. The wind carried something acrid and familiar, ether, scorched metal, and anxiety-laced sweat, the smell of fear. Hannah approached quietly. "There's someone you should meet." She brought Rowan to a woman standing alone with a small camera pressed to her chest. She was slender, early 40s, with tightly curled dark hair tucked under a beanie and sharp eyes that moved like someone trained to analyze before speaking. Her brown skin contrasted with her simple gray jacket and black jeans, clothing deliberately chosen to blend rather than draw attention. "This is Special Agent Laura Bennett," Hannah whispered. "Federal investigations. She's undercover today." Laura nodded, voice soft but firm. "We've followed Harlow's program for months. Nothing sticks, no whistleblowers, no documents. Dogs disappear, handlers get reassigned. All we have are rumors and half-buried testimonies." Her gaze shifted to Ridge, studying him with a mixture of concern and awe. "But you may hold the missing piece." Ridge did not growl. He simply stared back, silent and solemn like a soldier acknowledging another soldier. "Bennett already has a plan," Hannah continued, "but we need your help." Rowan listened as Laura outlined a coordinated goal. Infiltrate the restricted kennel area, gather visual proof of unethical practices, record sound from the back room where, according to an anonymous insider, behavioral correction sessions were conducted. "We just need one thing," Laura said. "A trigger, something undeniable." Ridge turned his head sharply, ears rising, tail stiff, pulling on the leash in a slow, deliberate motion. "He'll show us," Rowan said. "He always does." They followed Ridge along the perimeter, weaving past equipment sheds and generators. With every step, the shepherd's breath grew faster, not in panic, but in resolve. By the time they reached a small metal door at the back of the main structure, Ridge's legs trembled, not from fear, but from memory. He placed one paw against the steel, lowering his head as if saluting a tomb. Rowan opened the door. Inside, the temperature dropped. The fluorescent lights flickered above a row of cages containing silent, sedated dogs. Their fur was matted, their bodies limp. Chemical vials lined the counters, next to wires, electrodes, and shock collar prototypes. Notes scrawled in shorthand documented the schedule of electrical calibration. Rowan's chest tightened. This wasn't training. It was mutilation disguised as science. From a corner cage, a weakened Belgian Malinois stirred. His coat was thin and dull, ribs visible beneath the tight skin. A shock collar, much larger than standard, was strapped around his neck. He sniffed the air, lifting his head with monumental effort. When his eyes landed on Ridge, something changed. His tail gave a single thump. He let out a raspy, broken bark. Recognition. 2 soldiers who had survived the same torment. Rowan swallowed hard. You know him. Ridge moved closer, pressing his forehead to the bars. The Malinois responded with a hoarse whine, brushing his muzzle through a small gap. Their connection was raw, painful, wordless. A meeting of 2 souls carved by the same cruelty. Hannah covered her mouth, shaken. Laura filmed quietly, her jaw clenched. Without warning, the speaker system blared from the arena outside. A sharp electronic whistle designed to force instant obedience. The sound pierced the air like a blade. Ridge staggered backward, claws scraping the cement. His entire body rushed into panic, legs low, tail tucked, ears flat. His chest heaved. He shook violently. But then, slowly, he turned to Rowan. Not away. Toward. His eyes weren't pleading for escape. They were asking, "Tell me who we fight for this time." Rowan knelt, placing both hands on Ridge's shoulders. "Your call, soldier. I'm with you." And in that moment, Ridge's trembling steadied. Suddenly, chaos erupted outside. Shouts, barking, gasps from spectators. Laura leaned to the security monitor, eyes widening. He's using shock trigger displays on a dog in front of the audience. God, he's reckless. Rowan didn't wait. Neither did Ridge. They burst through the door, Ridge sprinting ahead. When he reached the demonstration ring, he didn't attack. Instead, he planted himself between the terrified demonstration dog and the electronic whistle device, disrupting the sequence of commands. The system stuttered, faltered, its perfect obedience fractured. The crowd erupted into alarmed murmurs. Handlers shouted, Harlow screamed. But dogs across the kennels, startled awake, began to howl. One after another, their voices rose in a chorus of pain and rebellion, echoing across the compound like a collective memory refusing to stay buried. And for the first time, dozens of dogs turned, not to their handlers, not to the speakers, but to Ridge. Waiting for something new, waiting for freedom. If this chapter touched your heart with reminders of justice, bravery, and God's unseen protection, please like, comment, and subscribe to Guardian Stories Ridge so these stories of hope can reach more souls. The aftermath unfolded in a torrent of headlines, legal summons, military inquiries, and phone calls that never seemed to stop ringing. The chaos that Harlow unleashed over years of hidden cruelty could not be concealed anymore. Federal agents swarmed the Harlow Tactical Training Complex that very night. And what began as a demonstration had turned into a full-scale criminal investigation. Satellite trucks rolled in. Reporters crowded past barricades. By sunrise, Harlow himself was escorted out in handcuffs, jaw tight, face pale, eyes darting as though searching for a way to rewrite the consequences now tightening around him. His mugshot spread across every news outlet before noon. And right beside those images, everywhere, in newspapers, online articles, evening broadcasts, was a single frame captured during the chaos. Ridge throwing himself into the demonstration ring, standing between an abused dog and the electric command system with a courage that made the audience gasp. The caption appeared beneath almost every repost. The Guardian Dog. The title stuck, and it carried weight. The federal investigators who took statements from Rowan, Hannah, and Sheriff Lucas treated Ridge like a veteran giving testimony. Rowan explained how instinct, not obedience, had pushed Ridge into the arena. How dogs understood danger more honestly than any device or command. How Ridge, once labeled unstable, had risked everything to shield another creature. Rowan didn't consider himself a man good with words, but when he stood before a panel of military officials and investigators, something in him unlocked. Perhaps because he wasn't talking about military protocols or battle reports, he was talking about a friend. He wasn't malfunctioning, Rowan said steadily, even as his voice thickened. He was warning you. Every so-called disobedient dog you threw away was trying to tell you something you refused to hear. Ridge didn't fail anyone. You failed him. Silence fell across the room. Some of the officials looked uncomfortable, others ashamed. But a few, especially older veterans, nodded slowly, the weight of realization settling heavily on their shoulders. Hannah presented her veterinary report next, detailing signs of prolonged psychological trauma, anxiety imprints, heart stress, nerve damage from repeated shocks. None of it could be dismissed now. The proof was too thorough. But while the case moved forward, Ridge began to falter. He collapsed 2 nights after the rescue mission at Harlow's facility. One moment he was drinking water, the next his legs buckled under him. Rowan caught him before he hit the ground, cradling the shepherd's trembling body against his chest. Ridge struggled to breathe. Fast, shallow, each inhale sounding like something scraping inside his chest. The clinic's sterile light made every shadow under Ridge's ribs look sharper, more fragile. Stress pneumonia, Hannah diagnosed gently, her brows knitted with fear. Years of suppressed adrenaline can do this. His system finally hit a breaking point. For the first time since returning from Afghanistan, Rowan found himself on his knees, not in battle, not in grief, but in prayer. His hand rested on Ridge's back, feeling each ragged breath. "Lord." "Not him," Rowan whispered. "Take anything else from me, but not him." Ridge lifted his head weakly at the sound of Rowan's voice. The shepherd's eyes, once empty, then haunted, then fiercely alive, held something different now. Trust, pure and complete. He was no longer flinching from touch. He was leaning into it. Rowan stayed every night in the clinic's small recovery room, sleeping in the chair or not sleeping at all. Sometimes Hannah brought him coffee. Sometimes Sheriff Lucas came by with updates or quiet company. Sometimes Maddie visited, tiptoeing in with a blanket she had knitted in crooked loops, placing it gently over Ridge and whispering, "Get better, guardian dog." On the 4th morning, the town began sending packages, homemade treats, letters from children, bandanas, tiny carved wooden dogs, and an entire box of knitted toys from the local quilting circle. But nothing affected Rowan as deeply as Maddie's drawing. She gave it to him outside the clinic, holding the paper with both hands. It showed Ridge standing proud at the ranch gate, the fence behind him fully repaired, and a sky full of bright blue. Above the dog, in shaky handwriting, "Some heroes have 4 legs." That afternoon, Ridge finally stood on his own feet. His recovery was slow, but steady. And when Rowan brought him back to the ranch weeks later, something miraculous happened. Ridge did not freeze at the threshold of the old wooden kennel. He did not tremble or flatten his ears. He walked toward it, paused for one quiet heartbeat, then stepped inside on his own. He made a slow circle, sniffed the corners, looked at the repaired boards. Then he walked out calmly, past Rowan, up the porch steps, and lay down in front of Rowan's boots. His head gently pressed against Rowan's thigh, as if making a decision without words. This was home now. In the months that followed, the ranch transformed. With funds that Sheriff Lucas secured from state grants and donations from across Montana, Rowan and Hannah built a rehabilitation sanctuary for retired and injured K-9 units. Not a kennel, not a training site, a refuge. The little valley behind the barn became fenced fields. The old horse stalls turned into wide-open recovery rooms. Trails through the pine forest became calm walking paths for dogs who needed space and silence. Rowan found a new purpose: teaching veterans, volunteers, and families how to connect with dogs not through dominance, but through partnership, through respect, through listening. He used a style halfway between marine command and gentle conversation. Walk with me. Look at the wind. Tell me what you see. And Ridge, finally whole, became the sanctuary's quiet captain. He visited every new dog, deciding instinctively which ones were too scared to be touched, which ones needed a companion, which ones required space. He patrolled the fence line like a sentinel, not from fear, but from duty. He knew what it felt like to arrive broken. He was determined no other warrior would face that alone. Maddie's family moved to a small house near the ranch so her father could work maintenance for the new sanctuary. He walked with a grateful humility now, freed from the mining company's grip. Maddie visited daily, bringing cookies or drawings for the dogs. Everything seemed to align, like a life that had been shattered was finally clicking back into place. One warm evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting the field in golden haze, Ridge suddenly lifted his head. His ears straightened, nose tilted toward the wind, his body aligned in a perfect line of alertness. Not panic, not dread, but awareness. Rowan didn't look up at first. He knew that posture. It wasn't fear. It was foresight. Ridge stared at the dirt road leading to the ranch, eyes narrowing slightly. "What do you see, buddy?" Rowan murmured. Ridge didn't move. He didn't growl. He simply watched, silent, steady, ready. And in that stillness, Rowan felt it too. Something, or someone, was coming. But this time, they were not two broken souls hiding from the world. This time, they were guardians. Later, as the sun fully set and Hannah stepped onto the porch with 2 steaming cups of coffee, she nudged Rowan playfully. "You do realize that dog of yours has saved more lives in a year than most soldiers do in an entire deployment, right?" Rowan allowed himself a rare full smile. Not has saved, still saving. The sounds of children playing drifted across the fields. The laughter of volunteers echoed from the training yard. A pair of newly rescued dogs bounded after a glimmering ball in the last ribbons of daylight. Ridge lay beside Rowan, one paw brushing Rowan's boot, the simple contact grounding them both. The world didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt rebuilt, together. A final thought settled over the ranch as the night air cooled, gentle as a blessing. Sometimes, it isn't a man who saves a dog, but the spirit of a dog that leads a lost man, nice back to the life he was meant to live. And together, they became the final refuge for forgotten 4-legged warriors. If this story reminds you that God's miracles often come through the guardians He places beside us, please like, comment, and subscribe to Guardian Stories Ridge so these stories can touch more hearts. Sometimes the quiet miracles of God do not arrive as thunder or lightning, but as a gentle presence walking beside us. In a hurting world, He often sends His comfort through unexpected guardians. A loyal dog, a stranger's kindness, a moment of courage we didn't know we still had. These small graces remind us that even in ordinary days, heaven still reaches down to steady our steps. If this story touched your heart, please share it so others may feel that same hope. Leave a comment, subscribe to Guardian Stories Ridge, and pray with us for every soul who watches these stories. May God bless you, protect your home, guide your path, and remind you that His miracles often come softly, but they always come.